Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Nancy Hillis,
And I'm Dr. Bruce Sawhill.
and today we wanted to come on this Sunday and talk about something we've been talking about in conversation together, and that is the topic of dreams and how we have dreams for our life and for our art, and how that connects to the hero's journey. And so I was thinking about how, you might have this big dream to be an artist, or be an artist that where you love your art, where you're surprised by the art you're making, sort of be the artist of your dreams. Or it could be something like, writing a book, which is something that,
Any
right?
large creative enterprise. What brought this up is that I had a major victory that had been 18 years in process this last week, and we'll talk about that later.
That's right. And I was just thinking about, though, dreams could be anything. It could be writing a book, like, as you know, I think some of you know, Bruce and I have been writing a book together, and which is going to include 25 artists and their amazing stories and their artwork as well. Or it could be composing music like you do, right?
And like I wanted to do more of.
Whatever it is for you, right? It might be to play a musical instrument, whatever that dream is, it's calling you. And the tendency at first is to refuse. It's the refusal. And this is something Bruce and I write about, and it threads through everything that we write about. And then another piece of that is when you finally get past the refusal and you say, yes, I'm going to do this, then you're plunged into perils. And that's where the fear can arise and the self-doubt and all that. Thankfully, we have mentors and guides, right, Bruce?
Yes, and we also want to talk about this idea of, retrodiction, meaning that, there's probably lots of things in everybody's life where you look back on something you did, generally something you're happy you did, and say, if somebody had told me how hard it was going to be at the beginning, I would have never done it. And so there's a lesson in there as to not dissuading yourself prematurely.
That's very important. And that's that piece too around self-doubt, and where you get plunged into the dark night of the soul, where you think, what was I thinking? This is taking so long. We've got 2 stories about that, and all of that. So let's look at this for a minute. So in these conversations we had, Bruce, for you, it's been 2 different things that kind of come at this at different angles, this whole issue of the hero's journey.
Right. Both involved a lot of twists and turns. So a hero's journey in that sense, and setbacks and victories. So maybe I start with the one that was most recent, the one that kicked this all off. And that has nothing to do with art or music or writing or science. It has to do with being socially and politically involved. So that's something I never did in my life. I thought, well, I'm too introverted for this. I'm not really interested. I can't make a difference. I'm not trained. So 18 years ago, shortly after I moved to Santa Cruz County, I became aware that there was an old rail line that ran through the county that had been there 150 years. And I thought, well, gosh, this goes beautiful places. A lot of it's along the ocean. It's amazing. And then I found out that it wasn't being used anymore. And I thought, well, we should use it. And I got involved in that whole process. And there are many, many details. But I thought, wow, I'll write a few op-eds. I'll speak at some meetings. And maybe in 2 or 3 years, well, I'll feel that I contributed something, and that the whole thing will be back towards reusing the rail line again. And in this particular case, the idea of a trail alongside it, and then passenger rail running on the line, which is about 20 miles from here to the main line that runs from Seattle to LA, connecting our county with the rest of the world. Well, it took 18 years.
And it was a pitched battle.
It was a pitched battle at times. Lots of NIMBYs, lots of bureaucratic resistance, even organized and well-funded resistance. But, that's all details. Last week, our Transportation Commission voted to go set about acquiring many millions of dollars to go about designing a passenger rail system.
Yeah.
And the trail part of it is already underway. So I feel that I had a great deal to do with this. But if somebody had told me this in 2004, how hard it was going to be, I would have said, nah, I'll do something else.
I think that gets at a piece here where it's like you've got this dream, and you finally moved past the refusal, and you finally said yes, But then the problems arise, right? The perils, the dark night of the soul, all that. We start to say, hey, what was I thinking? And see, that's the part where one could give up. But what's important is to not give up, to keep going. Okay. And we had our moments with this forthcoming book where we started this 2 years ago, and it got way more complex than we thought it was going to be, with all the stories and the images and the interviews and all that. But you got to somehow hold on through that dark night. And I think we did.
And the challenges, I think, ended up being the most compelling part of this new book. I think the stories are going to be the most interesting thing, because it talks about how real people deal with these kind of theoretical, abstract concepts that we talk about, like hero's journey and dark night of the soul, and
phase transitions,
stuff from science and stuff from psychology. And how does this actually manifest in the lives of individual artists? And at first we thought, well, will people be interested in doing this? We got very little uptake at first, because people were, this again addresses the issue, people were very shy about writing about themselves, especially if it was going to be printed for all the world to see. But we figured out a way around that, and then we ended up with an avalanche of stories. And so that's how the book kind of met its big challenge and transcended it.
That's right. So this forthcoming book is called The Adjacent Possible: Guidebook and Stories of Artistic Transformation. And it's essentially the stories of 25 artists and how their art transformed and their lives transformed through concepts involving the adjacent possible. And if any of you want to understand more about the adjacent possible, you might want to get our first book, which won a Book Excellence Award. This is a review copy, but essentially this is The Adjacent Possible: Evolve Your Art from Blank Canvas to Prolific Artist. This describes and talks about and animates this concept of the adjacent possible, which comes from evolutionary biology and the intersection of math and science, essentially. And it's all about creativity. We believe it's the art and science of creativity. So you might get that book first, read it, because the second in the series is coming. It's the one with the green cover that you all chose. And we're so excited to get these stories out to you about that. So that's coming really soon. So yeah, we had this big dream to write this book together and to bring in 25 artists. And so, you know, I'd like for you to think about, what's your dream? Okay, what is the dream that's been calling you, or that calls you right now, that maybe you've been refusing? And maybe think about that and reflect on that and see if you might step into that dream. If you might say yes. We talk about 0 to 1. This concept in mathematics of from nothing to something is larger. That interval is larger than 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and so on. So that movement of saying yes and going ahead anyway is enormous. So I encourage you in that. Bruce has another story from his own experience. He is a musician and composer. And so there was something about that in music for you.
Well, when I was a freshman in college, my first few days on campus, there's a quadrangle, and I walked up to this beautiful ornate sandstone church. And I had gotten interested in organ music for about a year before and had been dabbling at teaching myself. But somebody was playing the stuffing out of this gigantic pipe organ in this church. And I thought, wow, that's so cool. I want to learn how to do that. And I didn't have the expectation. This is all about expectations. I didn't have the expectation that I would become a performing concert organist like I eventually did. I just thought, that's so cool. I want to learn how to do it. It's like looking at the cockpit of an aircraft and saying, I'd like to sit in the pilot seat and see how everything works, not necessarily fly from, San Francisco to Sydney, Australia. So not going in there with expectations actually made it a lot easier, because each step was the adjacent possible. Well, let's see, I'm learning how to use my hands. Maybe I can start learning how to use my feet. And then I thought, well, maybe I can start learning all the voices, all the different sounds the organ can make. And then I can start learning about interpreting certain composers of the German Baroque and so on. It was step by step, adjacent possible by adjacent possible.
One thing leads to the next, and something opens and surprises you because you don't know ahead of time what's going to happen. And I think that piece you were just saying about really kind of dropping the expectations and not worrying about, being this great musician or maybe this great composer or maybe this fabulous artist, but rather just saying yes and just stepping into it right now and see where it leads you. And hopefully it takes you somewhere new. And it just takes you one step at a time, right?
Yes. And it was the opposite of the railroad experience where I thought, how hard can this be? We got some track, get a locomotive and some coaches and run them back and forth. It's not rocket science, it's railroad science. It turns out that it was a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah, and you never know. So that's our invitation to you is, look at what your dreams are. There may be one, there may be more. What are these dreams, or what is the dream that's calling you? And what if you said yes? And what if you stepped into it, from 0 to 1 and just went ahead anyway, not worrying about masterpieces, but just literally stepping into the unknown, stepping into the adjacent possible and saying yes to your art and to your dreams. So that's our invitation for you today. I hope you enjoyed this and enjoy these little stories of art and music and trains and dreams. So thanks for being here, and
thank you.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.